Welcome back to Sissy Maya. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to never miss an update. Additionally, consider subscribing to my Patreon to get access to these features, and much more. Yes, she exclaimed with a delighted squeal as she read the letter again. Finally, being the last of the line pays off. Madison Stevens, a 22-year-old brunette with a knack for dreaming up grand ideas, lacked the drive to bring them to fruition. Pretty in a demure manner, her personality exuded cheerfulness and amiability, though her social skills were lacking. She often spent Friday and Saturday nights at home with the TV, occasionally indulging in a rented tape and the VCR. Insecure, she struggled to advance in the corporate world, overshadowed during promotion opportunities and too timid to advocate for herself. Currently, she worked in the mailroom of a large department store, a job that didn't offer much pay but demanded hard work. Her insecurity stemmed from the tragic car accident 7 years prior, which claimed the lives of her parents and brother, leaving her alone to navigate grief. She often regretted not joining her family for a movie night instead of opting for a sleepover at her friend Allison's house. Nonetheless, Allison had been a source of support, remaining her closest friend. And now, the letter she had scarcely dared to hope for had arrived. Ms. Stevens, I regret to inform you of the passing of your great-uncle Benjamin. He passed away at the age of 90 last Friday, October 11th. Your great-uncle, known for his wealth and philanthropy, will be dearly missed by those who knew and benefited from him. Furthermore, as the last surviving member of the Stevens family, you are prominently mentioned in Mr. Stevens's will. You have been designated as the sole beneficiary. Therefore, I kindly request your presence at my office in Portland on Wednesday, October 16th at 2 p.m. for the reading of his will. If this timing is inconvenient for you, please contact me prior to that date. Sincerely, David Baxter, Attorney at Law. Kim was overwhelmed with emotion. Finally, an opportunity to advance in life presented itself. She knew little about her great-uncle, except that he was immensely wealthy. He seldom interacted with her at family gatherings, but she recalled his fondness for her late brother, often sharing tales of their family's supposedly illustrious lineage. Following the tragedy, she encountered him only once at the funeral, where he paid her scant attention. She remembered his sudden appearance after the service, gripping her shoulders and drawing close until their faces were mere inches apart. His gaze bore into hers for an uncomfortably long moment, as if delving into her soul. Then, with a decisive nod, he withdrew, offering a brief, cryptic message, "Courage, Kim," before departing. Since Kim preferred not to dwell on those memories, she hadn't pondered her great-uncle's peculiar behavior much. However, with his passing and the arrival of the promising letter, she found herself revisiting the incident. Despite her efforts, she couldn't decipher it further, chalking it up to the eccentricity of a wealthy man. Excited by her newfound prospects, she hurried to call Allison and share the news. The following day at work was a struggle for Kim, though she managed to avoid any mishaps. The thought of resigning crossed her mind, but she deemed it premature. Instead, she mustered the courage to request 3 days off, albeit facing a reprimand from her foreman for her perceived lack of commitment. Despite the guilt trip, her request was reluctantly approved. Early on Wednesday, Kim boarded the train from Chicago to Portland, arriving at the David Baxter Law offices with time to spare. As she waited in the opulent reception area, she resisted imagining the potential wealth awaiting her. Memories of her childhood visit to her great-uncle Benjamin's mansion flickered in her mind, her eyes widening at the grandeur of the estate. Eventually, an oak door swung open, revealing a distinguished, bearded man of around 70. "Ms. Stevens," he greeted in a deep, resonant voice, "I'm David Baxter. It's a pleasure to meet you. Please, come in." Kim entered the office with a sense of unease, keenly aware of her perceived lack of sophistication compared to the elegant Mr. Baxter. Without a word, she sank into the queen and chair he indicated. "Now, Ms. Stevens, or may I call you Madison?" he inquired. Madison nodded meekly, though she was accustomed to being called Kim. "How familiar are you with your family history?"
Madison admitted to knowing very little beyond the tales her brother had shared about Great-Uncle Benjamin's stories. According to him, the Stevens family hailed from a small town in England, allegedly descending from nobility, although she couldn't recall any specific names. She conveyed this to Mr. Baxter with a hint of guilt, though his lack of surprise reassured her. "No need for you to be aware of that, Madison. Your great-uncle held rather traditional views, not as progressive as many men today. He strongly believed in the patriarchal structure of family, extending to his perspective on the women's movement," Mr. Baxter remarked, his tone less than approving when mentioning the women's movement. "Nevertheless," he continued, "while he harbored no personal animosity toward you, your gender hindered him from forming as close a bond with you as he did with your brother. Nonetheless, as the last surviving member of the Stevens family, the majority of Benjamin Stevens's wealth is bequeathed to you." Kim closed her eyes, suppressing the smile eager to break free. Though successful in her effort, Mr. Baxter's expression of disdain indicated her lack of complete success. "Now, Ms. Stevens, before you become too excited." Kim blushed with embarrassment as Mr. Baxter interrupted her thoughts. "Certain conditions must be met before the transfer of wealth and property can occur." Kim's concern mounted upon hearing this, sitting up in her chair, anticipating that these conditions would be daunting, if not impossible. "Madison, I can see your earnestness regarding these conditions. Please, don't worry. Having reviewed them, I assure you they may appear unconventional but are not overly demanding. Allow me to read you the will." For the next half hour, Kim found herself alternating between confusion and amusement at her great-uncle's conditions. Initially, she was to provide fingerprints at the office and sign an identity oath, which, though odd, seemed manageable. Then came the directive to take possession of a 100-year-old bottle of port wine, with the requirement to toast her great-uncle Benjamin in his home, in front of his portrait. Sentimental, thought Kim, yet still feasible. However, the real peculiarity began with the demand to spend an entire night locked in her great-uncle's house, alone and without company. Baxter meticulously outlined the instructions, which her great-uncle had specified without ambiguity. All windows and doors, except the front entrance, had been sealed by a reputable construction team, and upon her entry, the remaining door would be sealed as well. Kim's eyes widened with concern as Baxter detailed the terms. Why would her great-uncle insist on such a requirement? For the first time, Baxter regarded her with gentleness. "Madison," he said, "your great-uncle anticipated your apprehension and instructed me to reassure you that there is no ulterior motive here. You will be alone in the house, and I can assure you, with a high degree of confidence, that his house is not haunted." Kim chuckled briefly, assuming Baxter was jesting, but his lack of laughter left her uncertain. Without further ado, he proceeded to reveal the final condition. It appeared her great-uncle had penned a personal letter for her to read after her overnight stay in the house. To ensure her compliance and ensure she stayed the entire night, the letter would be placed inside a time-lock safe just before her entry, set to unlock 12 hours after her arrival. Baxter assured her that reading the letter would more than sufficiently address her inquiries regarding the peculiar stipulations of the will. Setting the will aside, Baxter fixed his gaze on Kim. "Do you agree to the conditions, Ms. Stevens?" he inquired. "I must inform you that refusal would result in the entire estate being allocated to various charities. However, acceptance means that at 12 noon on Thursday, following your night in the house, ownership of your great-uncle's assets will be transferred to you." Kim didn't hesitate. What did a few peculiar conditions matter if they led to a life of luxury? "I accept," she murmured timidly, her first words in the past half hour. Kim complied with the fingerprinting procedure, signing her name on the attached identity oath. She then received the bottle of wine, securely encased in an ornate silver container, and was chauffeured by Baxter in his limousine to her great-uncle's imposing mansion. Their arrival lacked pomp as they entered the house. Kim observed a construction truck pulling up shortly after they crossed the threshold. With minimal conversation, Baxter guided her to the essentials within the house, offering a reverential bow before the grand portrait she was to toast. He then escorted her to the bedroom, where he unveiled the time-lock safe. Retrieving a sealed envelope from his coat pocket, he placed it inside the safe. After setting the internal timer for 12 hours into the future and sealing it with a dignified flourish, he spun the combination. Descending the elegant staircase together, Kim waited as Baxter opened the door. "And now, Miss Stevens, I bid you farewell. I eagerly anticipate our meeting tomorrow in my office shortly after noon," he declared with a dignified bow before departing through the door. Barely a minute after his departure, Kim heard the hiss of a welder's torch at the front entrance. Moments later, the house fell silent, save for the ticking of antique clocks. Attempting to open the front door, Kim was unsurprised to find it immovable. Glancing at her watch, she noted it was just past 7 p.m. Well, she thought, I might as well explore my new home. Kim ventured into the mansion, discovering her great-uncle's penchant for dramatic decor. Despite finding the surroundings old-fashioned and somewhat eerie, she recognized their potential value. The telephone, at least, operated in a modern manner, albeit with a musty scent. Engaging in a lengthy conversation with Allison, Kim relayed intricate details about the house and the peculiar conditions of her ownership. Their exchange filled with excitement and laughter, reaffirming their close bond. As they finally bid farewell over the phone 3 hours later, Kim felt a renewed sense of gratitude towards Allison, her steadfast friend. Now an heiress, she began contemplating extravagant ways to express her appreciation for Allison's unwavering support over the years. As Kim indulged in daydreams of exotic adventures abroad and luxurious cruises, fatigue began to set in. With the clock just ticking past 11 p.m., she attempted to alleviate the impersonal atmosphere of the house by lighting it up, yet still felt unease creeping in. However, accustomed to discomfort from her time spent in foster homes, she resolved to spend the night in this unfamiliar abode. Besides, a glass of wine seemed like a fitting prelude to slumber, especially given the occasion for a toast. Retrieving the silver casket housing the wine, Kim made her way to the hallway adorned with her great-uncle's portrait, her footsteps echoing ominously in the empty house. Unlocking the case with the key provided by Baxter, she extracted the dusty bottle, surprised by the lack of a discernible label denoting its vintage. Scouring a drawer beneath the oak bar, she unearthed an elaborate corkscrew. With a sigh, the cork yielded to her efforts, and she cautiously sniffed at the open bottle. Though not quite what she anticipated, Kim's limited knowledge of wine kept her from making any conclusive judgment. Pouring a quarter of the bottle into a crystal wine glass from the bar, she turned her attention to her great-uncle's portrait. Recalling it to be a reasonable likeness, she noted with mild surprise that unlike many portraits of affluent individuals, her great-uncle wore a genuine smile, though his demeanor still carried a hint of solemnity. Raising her glass in salute, she addressed the portrait, "Here's to you, Uncle Benjamin. You've brought joy to a girl's heart, and I'll strive to carry on your good deeds. Rest peacefully, Uncle. This toast is in your honor." The dark wine possessed a pleasant, albeit enigmatic, flavor. Though not entirely to her liking, it surpassed her expectations, and the comforting warmth it imbued her with was immediate. Despite feeling a bit lightheaded, she managed to drain the glass before making her way to the bedroom. Initially intending to search for a toothbrush before retiring for the night, her dizzying sensation convinced her to postpone the task until morning. Hastily undressing, she slipped into a delicate silk nightgown she had packed. With her head spinning, she crawled beneath the covers of her great-uncle's bed. Overwhelmed by the day's events, she succumbed to sleep almost instantly. Kim had never been particularly prone to vivid dreams, but tonight was an exception. Her dreams lacked coherence yet brimmed with vivid imagery, all sharing a common thread. Some unfolded in the exotic locales she had pondered before bed, while others transpired within the confines of the mansion, all revolving around a strikingly beautiful woman. In her dreams, Kim found herself fixated on this enigmatic figure, perpetually searching for her from an indiscernible perspective. Each time she drew near enough to touch the dream woman, another dream would unfurl. Though she briefly awoke several times throughout the night, her exhaustion compelled her back to slumber. In her final dream, she finally reached the mysterious woman. As they reached out to each other in a cliché slow-motion embrace, Kim realized she was seeing the scene through a man's eyes. The arms extended before her were adorned in a tweed coat with golden cufflinks peeking out, the hands noticeably larger and adorned with expensive men's rings. As their hands intertwined, the dream dissolved into the bright light of morning. Awakening, Kim felt refreshed yet somewhat foggy-headed. As she gradually roused herself, a click and muffled squeak signaled the opening of the time-lock safe. Eager with anticipation, Kim prepared to inspect its contents. However, as she attempted to rise from bed, she heard a rip as her nightie tore in two places. Surveying the damage, her world seemed to shatter. Beneath the remnants of her nightie lay a muscular, hairy chest with impressive pectorals and a defined abdomen. "What in the?" she gasped, her astonishment echoing in the masculine voice that escaped her lips. Her hands instinctively reached for the unfamiliar chest, the coarse chest hair foreign against her fingertips. "This must be a dream," she muttered in her newfound deep voice, pinching herself in a futile attempt to awaken. Grimacing at the unexpected pain, she then inspected her face, a cry of anguish escaping her throat as she felt the rough, masculine skin and stubble beneath her touch. Struggling to comprehend her altered state, Kim sprang from the bed, noticing the unfamiliar weightiness of her body as her feet met the ground. Gazing down at her legs, she was startled to find them transformed into the powerful, hairy limbs of a man. Hastening to the mirror adjacent to the bed, she marveled at the foreign sensation of movement coursing through her. Staring back at her was the reflection of a remarkably handsome man, roughly her own age. Though traces of her former self lingered in his visage, every other aspect seemed impossibly altered. Ripping away the remnants of her nightie, she gasped at the revelation before her. Before stood a lean, muscular physique with narrow hips, while between her legs, a proud manhood now protruded. Instinctively reaching for it, she was met with an unusual surge of urgency as it swiftly responded, engorging and stiffening. Though overwhelmed by the unfamiliar sensations, she released her grip, still grappling with the enormity of the transformation that had transpired. Recalling the letter purported to hold all the answers, Kim, still grappling with the cumbersome movements of her new body, made her way to the safe. Though she felt more like she was lumbering than walking, she eventually reached her destination and retrieved the envelope. With less than graceful hands, she tore open the seal and withdrew the letter. Through wide, disbelieving eyes, she absorbed its contents. "My dear Kim, if all has gone according to my plan, I am deceased and you are reading this through male eyes. I beg your pardon for this transformation, but the Stevens family's legacy must endure beyond my demise. Though I have divulged scant details of our lineage, peruse the chronicles that Baxter will provide, and you shall discover our descent from noble lineage intertwined with what you may deem as magic. An ancient mage once took a mate, and his lineage has since coursed through generations of Stevens. Few were privy to this knowledge, and it was only through my affluence that I unraveled its existence. Kim, our family's legacy is of paramount importance. If the prophecies I have unearthed hold true, the Stevens shall play a pivotal role in the annals of future history. Embrace the gifts bestowed upon you, for despite your current discord with your new form, I am confident that with time, you shall not only accept it but relish it. The potion within the wine has endowed you not merely with masculinity but with potent virility. Soon, its enchantment shall awaken desires hitherto unimaginable to you. With your inheritance, you are now equipped to fulfill these desires in any manner you deem fit. I have entrusted Baxter with my every secret, and upon presenting yourself to him as Matthew Stevens, and allowing your unchanged fingerprints to be recorded, you may rightfully claim mastery over all that I possess. Farewell, Matthew. I depart this world with solace, knowing our lineage shall not perish. Signed with flourish, Benjamin Atkins Stevens, the letter concluded. Matthew, formerly Kim, pored over the letter repeatedly until he was certain of its contents. Exhausted by the morning's revelations, He collapsed onto the bed, noting the absence of breasts, which made lying on his stomach considerably more comfortable. As he lay there, a sense of comprehension washed over him, accompanied by a degree of resignation. Reflecting on the insignificance of his former life as Madison Stevens compared to the prospects of wealth and influence as Matthew Stevens, he recalled the vivid dreams from the previous night, a renewed body part surprising him. Gripping his newfound masculinity with fascination, he found himself immersed in intense ecstasy, the face of his dream lover gradually materializing in his mind. As his body spasmed with the onset of his first pleasureful release as a male, the image crystallized, and he recognized her as Allison. Allison, Kim's lifelong friend. Allison, potentially Matthew's lover. It felt like a natural progression. Overwhelmed by desire as climax approached, he shut his eyes, surrendering to the overwhelming pleasure. In the midst of his euphoria, his last coherent thought echoed, "Why not? As the last of the lineage, it falls upon me to take action."